by talking about the comprehensive plan and the economic development strategic plan. And because we're getting the comprehensive plan presentation tonight, and you've had the economic development strategic plan in the fall, I'm going to gloss over that. Again, when I'm talking to a service club or something, I spend more time on talking about where we're at now and the background on the comprehensive plan and the economic strategic plan. Again, you're going to get a very thumbnail sketch on that, I hope, if I can limit myself there. So, three numbers. Want you to keep in mind, I'll try to do my best to circle around to these at the end, but these are numbers that I'll quiz you on when we get to the finish. Okay, where we are today. Frankly, we're in a good spot. There's no going around that, and I'm pleased about that. I can brag about it a little bit because I had very little to do with it, and may have, so this isn't an attempt to pat myself on the back, it's an attempt to pat you all on the back, particularly those of you that have been here much longer than I have. And also, I guess, credit to Mr. Brenneman. This is the first time you've had a new face doing this in 16 years, and it's not a mistake to call it the Bob Brenneman era, because it was an era. Again, hats off to him, hats off to the administration, hats off to council, because council had a big part in that, and I'm just going to try to keep a good thing going. So to start off, we recently got the Polycom top 10 micropolitans in Ohio. We came in at #1. Not only are we #1 in Ohio, but we're number 17 nationally. Polycom's 2024 rankings are based on economic strength, consistency of your economy, and your degree of poverty. And digging a little deeper on that, a micropolitan is defined as a quasi-rural community with populations of between 10,000 and 50,000 people. There are 538 micropolitans in the country and 31 in Ohio. And again, we were #1 in Ohio and 17th overall. Now, for the newcomers on council, I guess Mr. Jose, to some extent, maybe you and I shouldn't claim too much credit for this because it's all based on 2023 information, but I rationalized this and I told Mr. Brenneman this. Clearly, the award clearly says 2024 on it, so we're claiming it, and I can justify that by saying that there's going to come a time where we're going to get blamed for something that we had no control over either, so you got to take the good and the bad. Also, I almost blew by this, but the other award down there in the lower left corner is Andre's 38th, well, it's not all Andre, the city's 38th year. It may feel like 38 years for him, of being recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association for Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. So again, a lot of financial stability within the community. We're seeing growth. Those graphs, the numbers may be a little hard to read, but those cover the last 6 years. The one on the left is new housing starts. The one on the right is total value of construction permitted. During 2023, we had almost $95 million in new construction. And in terms of housing starts, we had 45 housing starts in 2023, which, again, this is, I think they call this foreshadowing, but they're going back historically from 1999 to 2007, we were averaging 64 housing starts a year. Then from 2008 to 2022, that number fell to 16. So it's a 15-year period there. Now, a lot of things went on. It's a kind of a deep dive as things that led to that, and probably a discussion for another day. But when we talk about the housing shortage, I think that 15-year stretch where we had those kind of numbers explains a lot of that. So again, the good news is we're bouncing back. I'll have more on that in a little bit. 45 housing starts in 2023, but again, another little bit of foreshadowing here. Only 3 of those 45 houses were south of Bowman, and one of those south of Bowman was a Habitat house. And again, that's not a knock on Habitat, but it's kind of a sign that the private industry or private sector is not getting doing housing south of Bowman. Overall financial health of the city, the left shows income tax revenues. The yellow vertical line shows when the 0.5% income tax increase went into effect about 10 years ago. On the right is bed tax revenue. Obviously a big dip in the latter due to COVID, but that's coming back very strong. Again, a lot of credit for this economic success. It's not all Andre. It's the city as a whole, the administration, the council, also our economic partners, and I need to definitely mention them, WDC, Chamber of Commerce, Wayne County Visitors Convention Bureau, Main Street Worcester, all have a part of that, and the private sector. Again, the private sector drives a lot of this. And last but not least, the voters should be mentioned, because when that 0.5% increase came into effect, it was only because the voters did it, and we'd be living in a very different community now if that hadn't happened. Which is my segue to the next slide. When that did happen, and again, this is before I was on council, and maybe most of us were on council, except maybe Mr. Sanders. One of the commitments the administration made was to reinvest that additional revenue in capital projects. And this is a demonstration of how that has taken place over the years. I tried to dig down a little bit with Joel and Andre about the variations from year to year, and that was kind of a lost cause from the standpoint. The easiest thing to say is probably it's a timing issue, where depending on when bills got paid, it doesn't necessarily judge the activity, it just shows when the money went out the door. Currently, we have a number of big city projects going on. The Oak Hill Oldman Roundabout opened and is in full service now. And just in time when the spring gets here, or really I guess after summer, it'll be like last year's schedule, we will close up the north end of Oldman, Oak Hill, and start work on the Oak Hill Milltown Roundabout. We've got construction on Fire Station number 1 moving along well. I think you can really, if you're watching it on a daily basis, in the last week or so, you've seen some real progress being made there. And we've got 6 new pickleball courts to be installed down at Christmas Run Park. And again, a shout out to the Millers, Jack and his wife, for making sure that happened. Whoops. There we go. We've had a bunch of economic success that we can brag about recently. And again, this isn't anything that, certainly nothing I didn't, certainly nothing that's even happened just in the last couple of years. But Worcester Growth acquired 150 acres for our industrial park in the northeast end of town. And to date, we made $1 million of infrastructure improvements with half of that paid by federal and state grants. We've created 150 basic sector jobs there. And as a result, in addition to those jobs, we are seeing $775,000 annually in new tax revenue. The shot at the right is the TCI property on East Liberty Street. This has been a long-term project. It's a brownfield cleanup that is now close to completion, and we hope to get that property back in service again, providing value to the community. Okay, where we are going and where we want to be. Hopefully those two are the same. That's the goal. And again, comprehensive plan insights, I'm not going to dwell on this very much at all, because we're going to hear about that from a person that understands it better later this evening. I do want to say that it kind of has informed a little bit of our planning going forward, or a lot of it, but also really 3 of the topics that I want to touch on tonight. The first is growth and economic development. How do we keep it strategic and intentional? Second, housing. How do we address not just our current demands, but also our projected growth? And finally, focusing, I said this is really where the first 2 come into, where they meet, and the public schools come into here as well, is the south of Bowman neighborhoods. How do we develop that? How do we work on the housing south of Bowman? Because that's, at least to my mind, where really the greatest need is. Again, this is more of the comprehensive plan about where the community wants us to be in terms of services, and I'm sure this will be touched on a little later tonight. Population. We know we're growing. What we don't know necessarily is how fast we're going to grow. And again, we'll touch on this more tonight. But the comment I wanted to make here, I guess twofold. First of all, again, and you're going to hear this repeated often by me, is strategic and intentional. To the extent possible, I'd like us to be in control of our destiny and not just let growth take place as it will, but have it more structured. And second, I don't want us to take growth for granted. Some people may assume that, well, everybody's going to grow naturally. Well, that's not the case. If you look statewide, if you pull out the numbers from Columbus and Franklin County, statewide growth has been pretty stagnant. A lot of communities are staying even, or even some are even losing population. And for those communities, what they're seeing way too much of is populations that are aging, they're poorer, and they're less well-educated. So, we're certainly not growing like Columbus, nor do I want to grow like Columbus, but we've got growth going, and we've got some numbers to back this up that I'll show you in a little bit. Our population is trending younger than what you see in other areas. Again, the Economic Development Strategic Plan, spend more time on this when we're talking to groups that have not seen this before. I think you're familiar with this. This will take information from the comprehensive plan and build, kind of blend that into what is out there already. Business attraction. This is really where that first item goes, the focus area. And again, we're not chasing any business. We're not chasing all business. This is not a race to the bottom, and it's not growth just for the sake of growth. We want to be strategic and intentional about how it grows. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have a centralized economy and we're going to say yes and no on who comes in and who doesn't. But we can develop policies that influence growth. And we have some in place already. We're not working off a blank slate. That's what our zoning policy does already. But we can also use tax incentives in a strategic way to go after core sector jobs. Again, jobs that are high paying, full benefits, not subject to cyclical ups and downs. We've had a debate in the last year about tax incentives and their use, whether they should be entitlements or whether they should just be eligibilities. The previous administration, and I'm going to continue this, do not see them as entitlements. And what I would say to the community, or as I'm saying this, is that do you want to have tax incentives available to anybody that wants to use them or can make use of them if they'll build? And, is your answer the same if it's a vape shop, if it's a marijuana dispensary, if it's a car dealership? Menards, that project is sitting there. Do we want to offer a tax incentive to Menards to build? And I would say no. And it's not I'm not reflecting negatively on any of those businesses. They're all lawful enterprises, or the one's going to be, and they're going to be here, but do we want to use tax dollars to incentivize their construction? And my position is no. And again, council's going to come to their own conclusions on that. Again, this is a partnership arrangement. When it comes to legislation, the rule is the administration proposes and the legislation disposes. So I can come up with all the proposals in the world. Ultimately, the council is going to decide which ones they want to back and which ones they don't, and that's just the way it works. There is one specific proposal we hope to be bringing to you very shortly, and that's a zoning change specifically designed over energy efficiencies. And specifically, right now, we don't have anything in place to accommodate wind turbines or large-scale solar installations. So we're thinking that we may have some existing industries that might want to take advantage of that, or we may have some industries looking to come to us that would make use of that. So not that we couldn't, if somebody showed up, we could always adopt something on the spot, but we thought it might be worthwhile to get out in front of that and have something in place that could always be modified, but at least we'd have something there to work off of. The second thing we've talked about, and really Jonathan brought this to our attention, was the PACE district, which is property assessed clean energy districts. I'm going to get in trouble here because I'm going to go out a little bit beyond my knowledge, but I think there's some similarities to a TIF district in the way it's structured, but the general overall concept. So I'll leave it very vague, Jonathan. Does that work with you there? But something that might be a possibility for some areas. Again, more information about the Economic Development Strategic Plan. Workforce and talent. And it's kind of a chicken and egg type of thing. We want to bring in industry, we want housing, we need them both. To bring in workforce, we'd have to have the jobs available. To get the industry in, we have to have the workforce able to supply it. We love the fact that many retirees have chosen to live in Worcester. The quality of our healthcare services, the downtown, our safety service forces, all those things have a lot to do with that. But private industry is the economic engine that allows all the rest of that stuff to take place. And that's why it's a priority. We've got to protect the private sector, and it's why we want to be so strategic and intentional in pursuing employers that provide the well-paying core sector jobs. So this is how we segue over to the second kind of main focus point, and that's the housing shortage. What you're looking at there is a map of most of Wayne County there with a little bit of Stark in there. With the, I don't know if you call it a heat map, showing where our employees come from. And remembering that 2/3 of the jobs in Wayne County are in the city of Worcester. And this is where we draw our workforce from. So we're pulling them from quite a ways. And to the extent possible, you'd love to have your workforce all in town. That's not going to happen. And by the same token, some of the workforce here, or some of the people living here, are going to work elsewhere. That's just a fact of life. But there's about, right now, a 2,100 household unit deficit between the number of jobs in the city and the number of households we have in the city. So we are importing workers, which, again, may be the natural state of thing, but it's something, certainly a number to keep tabs on, because you don't want that to be too big, because number one, it's going to keep your housing prices high, and number two, it may have a negative impact on your employers. Again, we pulled this out of the strategic plan. It shows a little bit of, does some sampling of the typical homeowner in Wayne County versus the typical homeowner in the city of Worcester. And again, I don't want to touch on this too long, but by and large, this goes to the point I was making, where the city of Worcester trends younger than the rest of the county. This is a profile of our existing housing stock. The median age for housing is 1974, meaning half of the housing stock in the city of Worcester is older than that. Half of it's been built since 74. The numbers on that are pretty small, but on the far left in that bar graph, that's housing built before 1940. The next one over would be in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then the far right would be just housing built in the 2020s. And as you can see, certainly the last decade was not good for us in terms of housing. Going forward, we really want to focus on higher density housing. And to the extent possible, we'd like to infill meaning we're not trying not to grow. It's going to happen, but we're not trying to grow solely along the edges of the community and pushing out. This is going to do a couple things. First of all, it's going to preserve farmland to the extent possible. You know, if you're always expanding around the edges, or if you're expanding in the edges with, you know, minimum lot sizes of 1.5 acres, 2 acres, or even if you're outside the state, 5 acres and 10 acres, if you're on septic and well water, you know, nothing gobbles up farmland faster than that. So to the extent we can grow within the city, on city services, keep lot sizes small, that's going to be the most farm-friendly, and it's going to be the most environmentally friendly solution. And to some extent, we think a lot of the younger families, that's what they're looking for. They're not necessarily looking for a half-acre yard to mow and things like that. They want someplace, particularly in the downtown area, that doesn't have a lot of responsibilities. Now, to some extent, I know we have people in the community, particularly from the farm community, that don't want to see us have any further growth, and I'm just sorry to disappoint them. You know, they not only, you know, do they want us to stop growing in the Northeast, they'd like to get back some of the land we've taken, I think starting with everything north of Wayne Avenue. But, you know, it's not going to happen. We are going to continue to grow, at least in the short-term foreseeable future. Again, we have made dents in that housing backlog. This is just what we have on the books currently, and both in terms of stuff that's already been done and stuff that's being projected. There's 355 units there total. So again, we are making progress. Affordability is a hot topic, and again, much of this is pulled off of the comprehensive plan. This is where that first number comes from, $52,485. That's the median household income in Worcester. And probably we could go around the room, and I don't know whether, probably half of us think that's high, half of us think it's low. That might be a factor also of how old you are and how, you know, whether you're used to today's economic outlook. I can tell you by comparison that Wayne County as a whole, the median household income is about $10,000 higher. Also, Ohio as a whole, again, I'm not sure how valuable this number is about $5,000 higher. So I guess you can look at that in two different ways. Cost of living is certainly, despite what our housing costs have been overall, our cost of living is much lower in Wayne County. So that tells you a little bit about the income side of things. When I talk to people about affordability of housing, talk about two different sides of it. First of all, on the cost side of it, you have the cost of the homes themselves. What things can we do to make housing cheaper? And by the same token, what things do we want to do? And I'll just give you an extreme example. There was discussion in the last year about mobile home parks, and we voted, and I voted, to allow a limited expansion of existing mobile home park. That's affordable housing. We could go all in on that and become the mobile home capital of Northeast Ohio. I'm going to suggest that's not a good way to build wealth in the community. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to make individuals wealthy. We're trying to make the community wealthy. So I have no qualms about saying that I pulled this number out there because I think it should be our goal to bring that number up. We want our community and the people in our community to be wealthier. And we want to put them in an environment where that happens. Good education, good communities, good opportunities for jobs. So that's what we're looking at. Housing value. So the second part of that equation, so I was talking about cost. The second part of that equation is what's the ability to pay? And the previous slide talked about that a little bit, that $52,485. So one way we can make housing more affordable is to increase the buying power of the community. And again, there's no silver bullets to make that happen, but I think in the big picture, that's something we should be looking at. Housing values. I think Jonathan put this together. It's a reflection, and this is based on the last triennial that is just out now, of what the increases look like in housing values throughout the city from one area in different areas. And one thing you'll note, everything was positive. Housing values have gone up everywhere, but it's not been dispersed evenly. The downtown areas, or those, immediately around downtown, have not grown as fast as the others. So you may have seen the article in the paper this past week about a sheriff's deputy being stationed at the treasurer's office just to make sure that there were any, nobody got too emotional about their tax increases. And I see the guy basically first thing in the morning every day, and so far he's been very quiet. And in fact, he's a young guy, and I had to educate him a little bit. I had to explain who the Maytag repairman was and what the significance was, and he actually had to look it up. He had no idea. Shows how old I am and how young he was. But we were talking internally. I said, really, the people who should be mad about their taxes are the ones whose property values did not go up. You know, that was, for a lot of people, if you're a homeowner or you're a property owner, you know, one of the side effects of COVID was you saw a substantial increase in your balance sheet just because of appreciation in property values. But not everybody shared in that. Obviously, a lot of people do not own real estate, period. And a lot of people don't own real estate in the right areas to see that appreciation. And we'd like to address that. We really should address that because it's really a threat not just to the people in those areas and their housing values, but also to the downtown. So we're really looking to get some growth in housing in those areas. I'll go off on a little bit of a rant here. I said schools are kind of in the mix. And I think a lot of you know I've spent 2 terms on the school board, and the one thing I think you learn in your first 6 months on the school board is that the clearest indicator of a child's academic future is poverty rate. And unfortunately, poverty is not, poverty is the enemy. And the unfortunate thing is it's not spread evenly throughout the community. There are pockets of it. And in Worcester, specifically in the last school report card, 42.1% of our students are economically disadvantaged, which they measure by being at 130% of the federal poverty rate. That works out to over 1,300 students in our schools, and each one of those kids has a name that are growing up economically disadvantaged. And we know that, and I don't want to be too alarmist about that. That number is pretty much the same as what Orville and Rittman have as well. And typically, the bigger communities are going to have a higher rate on that. But on the flip side, it's higher than the rest of the county, all the rural districts, and there's even double, it's even double of what the lowest district is in the county. So again, it is a challenge. It makes education more expensive for all of us because kids coming out of poverty are more expensive to educate. They have more needs. And again, I'm not trying to certainly disparage the families involved in that or the kids or the teachers. I know from experience that schools typically assign their best teachers to the schools with the highest poverty rates because they're typically the superstars and are just really, doing heroic work with those kids. But right now we have a school system, and we've had for a long time, that segregates on the basis of poverty. I'm old enough, and I'm not sure who Mr. Myers is close to but when we were growing up, that school was Walnut Street. That was where the poor kids went. And then it got closed, and then it became Lincoln Way. And that's where the poverty kids tended to be located. Well, now that's closed. And when it closed, I was part of that. The school districts were gerrymandered on purpose, trying to balance out the numbers. At that time, the poverty rate at Lincoln Way was close to 90%. Well, They did a pretty good job at the time of getting those numbers close in hand, but now we've seen those numbers spread again. So we have a school, an elementary school, the schools are K-4 now, that serves most of the areas you see here, that's up close towards 70%. And at the other extreme, we have a K-4 school that's in the 30% range. The other two schools fall in between. And I've heard this argued, and I would support it, that if we segregated kids in school on the basis of race or religion, the way we do by poverty, there'd be an outroar, and there should be. So I'm fully behind this. If you followed it, the schools are talking about a redistricting plan that goes to grade level buildings. I think that's a key part of what we're talking about here. Again, the enemy is not poor people. The enemy is not the schools. The enemy is poverty. And right now, we've got ourselves in a situation where it's kind of cyclical. You know, the poor families are living in certain areas of town, not exclusively, but predominantly. And we've got to get some housing in there that breaks that up a little bit. And if we can get a start on that, and we can stop it so there's not a poor section of town and there's not a poor school, I think we can come a long way to making this a more attractive, you know, do this 10 years from now, I think it's going to be a much more appealing picture. So that's my rant. Sorry about that. Again, how can we get after the housing south of Bowman? And this doesn't, I shouldn't be exclusive to south of Bowman, because this can be used elsewhere, but again, we're looking to find places, and we're not trying to disrupt existing traditional housing areas, but we're looking for areas that can use new housing to backfill in and put in some smaller housing units that are more affordable. Again, more from the comprehensive plan. In addition to the housing downtown we're also looking at an arts district that we've talked about a little bit here, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come on that. And the community reinvestment area. This talks mostly about our downtown area. We've rehabilitated 27 downtown buildings, $33 million in new investment, 151 new jobs created downtown, and of the total tax revenue we're receiving from the downtown business district, 18% of it comes from properties that have been benefited through the Community Reinvestment Act. So again, an example of what that reinvestment part of the community CRA means. And again, a bullet point up from the slide. We are fourth in the state in terms of active CRAs. So, a little bit of closing here. That's Mr. Tursky's addition there. Phil's the inspirational guy, I can tell already. And again, close on these three numbers I talked about. I'm going to make no bones about the first two. I think it should be our goal, and it's certainly my goal, to work on driving that first number up, driving that second number down. And the third number, does anybody know what the third number is? Obviously, it's 2026, but what's the significance? Semi-quincentennial. 250th birthday of the country, and coming up in 2026. We got, just in the very beginning talking stages, some ideas are kicking around for some non-traditional ways we can do to recognize that, maybe get some community involvement on that. So that's a teaser. So I'm going to say, you know, stick around for next year's State of the Union. We'll have more details at that point. So thank you for your patience. I just ran a little bit over, and apologies for that. But again, I've really enjoyed the first 50 days have been tremendous, and looking forward to many more.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. We'll, at this point, we'll get started here at 7:40. All right, well, good evening. It is after 7:30, and part of our tardiness this evening was we were getting our State of the City address from Mr. Reynolds, and we appreciate him doing that, and we're not late because of him, but we're just running a little behind. But regardless, like I say, good evening, welcome. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of Worcester City Council held this Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Tonight's meeting is in council chambers and live streamed on YouTube. And our next regularly scheduled council meeting will be Monday, March 4th, 2024. With that, Ms. Hamilton, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Abernathy.
Here.
Mr. Gaffey.
Here.
Mr. Huzay.
Here.
Ms. Knappich. Here. Mr. Malta.
Here.
Mr. Myers.
Here.
Ms. Warden. Here.
All right, we have everyone is here this evening. We have a quorum, and the agenda will remain as presented. And at this time, if you'll stand and join the members of council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion from council to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Motion.
Mr. Abernathy has motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gaffey. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay. Minutes have been approved. Communications from the mayor and administration. So it's back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for not blaming the entire delay on me, but, you know, for the record, I did run over, so I will be partly responsible for that. Start off with, more seriously, in the last couple of days, we've had two different events involving our safety services, both of which were taken very seriously and investigated accordingly, and I thought we'd start off, and I'd ask Chief Fisher to address the first one.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you may or may not have heard, if you have children that attend Worcester City Schools, school was canceled today throughout the district. Started my day about 6:05 this morning with a phone call from Gabe Tudor. Was already at my desk. Some threats posted online. Listen, I can tell you it was brought to a fast resolution with very little information. In about 3.5 hours, we had a suspect, had a confession, and he was on his way to the detention center. So, I'll spare you the details. It was a juvenile, but I'd be remiss to not give kudos to the team. Detective Belcher, been doing the job 25 years, got hired about 6 months after I did. Key part of this, very good at his job. I gotta give him some credit. The sergeant and Chip that was working today, as soon as we got the call, and the student who, basically, they also deserve some credit because it's another student who actually turned it in that was able to forward it to us. But as I said, that student and the team at the department really deserve the credit because they did a great job today and got things resolved. So my hat's off to them. One last thing, and the mayor doesn't know I'm going to say this, but I just want to say thank you to all of you. A couple months ago, you all approved some first responder blood draws for us. And I have heard lots, but I only speak for me. Had a physical every year for the past 10 years. All is well. Try to eat right, take care of myself. I have a genetic marker that tends to lead to coronary artery disease that was flagged in this blood draw that nobody's ever caught before, that I have an appointment in March for my annual physical. Hey, bring up the ultrasound, check your carotids, let's make sure this isn't a problem. So at least for me, what you did is a step in the right direction. So I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And thanks for everybody, like I said, it was a team effort.
Absolutely.
Appreciate everybody doing that. And then the second thing turned out to be much less serious, but had people excited yesterday, and Joel is going to speak to that.
Sure. I'm sure you saw a lot of social media posts and various things. You may have experienced some of the smell from a known industry down on Industrial Boulevard. And we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. Again, we responded right away. Our fire department, anytime there's something that is perceived as, potentially noxious or something, they respond immediately. And depending on what the issue is, if they see a discharge to a stream, then they contact our engineering division as well, after they determine whether it's a hazardous substance or not, because we have an EPA requirement permit to monitor any discharges to streams. In this case, there was no discharge, no spill, no anything on site. So the other entity that we would contact would be our utilities department, because all industrial dischargers to our sanitary system are covered by an industrial pretreatment permit that's managed by our personnel down at our wastewater treatment plant. In this case, no discharge to our to that either. But they are the ones that hold all of the records on the various chemicals and things like that. So in this case, there was nothing hazardous on the site. Actually, that particular industry is permitted also by the Ohio EPA for the types of industrial materials that they process and treat. They are not allowed to have anything hazardous on site. They are not permitted to do any of that. So this was some pipeline byproduct material they were cleaning out. They have actually done this many, many times at the same facility down there. In this particular case, they have a couple methods they use for suppressing the odors, sawdust being the main one. They had never had any odor issues before. They were low on sawdust, so the operator thought, I can go ahead and do my normal process, and was mistaken. And so we went down and investigated that immediately, both our fire department and our utilities divisions, and ascertained there was no hazardous material. And unfortunately, they weren't able to get additional sawdust down there to remediate that until later in the morning. So that's what caused it to stick around for a little while. But we followed up with them. They agreed, put processes in place to not do that. If it comes again, they won't use anything until they have all of the proper materials on site to dissipate any odors. And as far as we know, they're complying with everything that we've asked at this time. So no hazardous, no toxic materials on site.
Okay. Thank you. And we've tried on both these things to keep council in the loop as much as possible. We were much more able to do that yesterday with regards to that incident than the one today, because the one today was obviously outside of our control. Council has learned about this about the same time I did, so we know on this. But again, two incidents that our people were called out for, not knowing up front what they were going to get into. Both of them resolved much better than could have been the case. So, Mark, let's leave it at that. Just a brief rundown of activities since our last meeting. There's a Wayne County CIC, which is kind of the equivalent of our Worcester Growth, except at a county level. We're not members of that, but Joel and I were invited to a meeting. They own the Wayne County Health Department building, and or I should say the county does, and I think they are talking about using the Wayne County CIC to develop that, and they wanted to talk to us about different possible uses on that, and we were happy to put in our 2 cents. Again, it's right adjacent to where that arts district is being discussed. There was a branding event put on by the Convention and Visitors Bureau at Minglewood. Jonathan and I made appearances at that on behalf of the city. Just coincidentally, Joel and I had 2 separate meetings the same day with the Boys and Girls Club and O-Huddle. If you're familiar with those organizations, 2 organizations, I know some of you are volunteers with them that work with our youth, and they're talking about both. It was interesting. They weren't coordinated in terms of, it was just kind of coincidence it was the same day, but they're both looking for ways that the city can partner with them to help support disadvantaged youth. They're not designed necessarily for disadvantaged youth, but just the way they both operate is that they tend to draw those. So again, we're very supportive of their efforts. Joel, Phil, Vince, and I had a meeting with Gabe Tudor to talk about the school's facilities plan and talk about how it might mesh with our future plans. Again, this goes back to some of the topics I touched on in the state of the city, but I think our goals align with the school district goals in a lot of ways. And you'll see that more coming forward. This really happened really the day of our last meeting, but I'm going to squeeze it in here anyway because I failed to bring it up last time. But we got a letter from Seaman Corporation, and don't think, we have some people in the room that may think this is no big deal, but they're celebrating their 75th anniversary. With the company headquartered being in Worcester the last 38 of those years. So they wanted to announce that, and they're going to be doing some things this year to in recognition of that. And we're working on a response from the city that's worthy of the occasion to congratulate them for their contributions and their success. February 6th, the Main Street Heritage Ohio Workshop was held down at the Best Western. I know Jen attended. Several of the city administrators were attended. I was there just for the beginning, but I had a chance to talk to people at the front and at the back end afterwards, and I can tell you that the organization, first of all, it didn't hurt that it was maybe one of the nicest days we had in February. The town looked great. They had a good turnout, and when talking to the people running the program, said part of it was due to the weather, but also part of it was that people like to come to Worcester. They know the success we've had in our downtown, and they want to come and see it firsthand, and they also want to find out how we did it. So again, and Jenna probably could share her comments on her own about that more in depth. Joel did speak about some of our downtown development history. That day after that, I did get the chance to swear in 3 new police officers. That was a very nice event up at the Justice Center. Chief Fisher had to coach me through there. I had, some rookie mistakes. He got me through it, though. But it was nice to see those new officers and their families there. And again, with the tragedy we've had in Minnesota this last week and, the Farmer Boy fire that had our people involved, I guess we should never take for granted the commitment that our safety services people voluntarily take on our behalf. So can't thank those people enough. Joel and I met with 2 separate sets of developers who are working on new housing developments, and some of those are consistent with what I talked about in the state of the city, in that they're kind of backfilling in areas that either have not been developed or areas that have been developed and the housing stock is really in bad shape. Some of those are for outside of town. Again, we'll see what comes of those. But we're making progress. And this housing shortage is, I think we tried to demonstrate in that it didn't spring up overnight. It took us 15 years or more to get there, and it's going to take us a while to dig out of that as well. Last week, we also became aware of some additional funding that's available for capital projects in this year's budget. We've reached out to Senator Landis, who represents our community in the State House, and we're trying to convince him to come to Worcester, and we told him we could find a use for some additional capital funding, and he might get a lunch out of it as well. We did have the employee recognition luncheon last Friday, Fiesta Friday. It was, I think, went over well. Employees seemed to enjoy it. I know a number of you made it to that event, and thank you to those that did. Freelander Chalet improvements are proceeding. We had a chance to see those firsthand if you were there at the luncheon. Fire Station number 1 renovation is moving along. The playground equipment at Clear Creek Park has been installed, so that's going on. And we are now well into Wootown Meltdown. And if you don't believe me, we have the T-shirt to prove it. I have added 2 pounds, so I think I'm winning. I think that's the way that works, right? So that's pretty much what's going on. As far as tonight, we have a short agenda that was somewhat intentional, staged that way. Again, we have the second reading of the amendment to the existing CRA agreement with Worcester Brush. Because of some logistical matters, we're going to need to keep that on second reading. We've talked about that before, but we have some gentlemen from Worcester Brush here that may want to speak to that. 2024-05 is an ordinance that would give us the option of hiring a full-time assistant law director. That's on second reading. And the final one is a budgeted item, and you'll hear more about that, but 3 readings is not required on that one. And I'll try not to be the little boy who cried wolf and tell you that everything we bring before you is urgent and a priority and has to be passed tonight, but this is one that really we could use passage tonight on that one. So I'll talk about that. And then we're going to have our OHM presentation of the comprehensive plan. And I'll close with just some recognitions. First of all, Mr. Sanders, and again, this is what I missed from last time around. I don't know if you caught this, but he was recently recognized as the Wayne County Park District Volunteer of the Year. And if you've ever been on one of his projects that he's organized, you know that he's well deserving of that honor. Thursday this week, our own Ashley Hirschberger, who happens to have a birthday tomorrow, if you see Ashley, will be receiving the Jack O'Donnell Award for Community Service at the annual Chamber of Commerce dinner. And on Friday, Joel is going to be speaking at an event in Independence for the Jobs Ohio Team NEO conference. So the number of people from the city are going to be accompanying him up there. The last thing I've got is a reminder that our next meeting, March 4th, John Ansel will be providing a presentation on Worcester growth. I think that's scheduled to start at 6:45. We know John's going to talk a long time. So even, you know, if I ran over a little bit, John would run over a lot if we started him at 7. So with that, Mr. President, I have no more to report, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dordia, did you have something you wanted to add related to this declaration of official intent that
So, that's just a requirement of the Internal Revenue Service if we would happen to issue debt. So we have 2 projects on our books that we're gonna issue debt for. So if we spend city dollars on them, we can get reimbursed once we issue that debt. Because we do have notes maturing in June, and I would obviously put those all together with those maturing at that point. So if we'd happen to spend some money on, we're gonna we bid out 1 project for Oak Hill, and Milton on the Roundabout. We spent some money up front, we can reimburse ourselves with debt. Just like an Irish requirement.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. At this point, we have no petitions. We also had no one sign up related to communications from the public. I guess I'll open it up. Mr. Maybar, Mr. Swift, do you have anything additional you want to add related to your
CRA.
change in the CRA?
We mainly came tonight to answer any questions. Some council members were not here last week, but the short answer was, you know, we appreciate the time you're giving to the amendment to the CRA that was previously approved, and we appreciate your support of that, obviously. But we are here, Tim and I came to answer any questions that anybody didn't ask last week, or that any of the council members that weren't here last night had.
Okay, thank you, thank you. At this point, we have no committee reports, we have no public hearings, so we will step right into unfinished business with the second reading of ordinance 2024-04. Ms. Hamilton, if you please read that for us.
Ordinance number 2024-04, an ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-16, authorizing the mayor to include Welch Packaging Group, Inc. as a tenant party to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Worcester and the Worcester Brush Company for immediate enactment.
Thank you. Before I turn this over to Mr. Abernathy, again, I have to state that due to business conflicts, if this should come to a vote where I need to be a tiebreaker, I will have to recuse myself. And I know that both Mr. Huzay and Mr. Gaffey also have statements they wish to make at this time.
Yeah, I just, as last time, being that the main applicant here is my regular employer, I feel I too need to recuse myself from this particular ordinance.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'll also be recusing myself from this ordinance.
All right, thank you. And with that, Mr. Abernathy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. So again, for those that were not here last week, Worcester Brush is seeking to add a tenant to their building. By the guidelines of the CRA, they are going to need our approval for that. We did have some outside parties previously that were concerned about this that have been resolved. So I would simply say for any of the members that have questions, I can certainly answer some, and we have folks that are here that could answer them. But it's pretty straightforward. They're just adding a tenant, and that tenant is going to have to abide by the same rules that Worcester Brush does, and the abatement does only impact Worcester Brush, not Welch Packaging. So I would open it up for questions or comments. All right, with that, then I would say we're leaving it on second reading.
All right, well, we'll say that it has had its second reading. Thank you very much. You sure?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, I was just going to comment that I think it's a good project. It sounds like, basically reading through everything, it sounds like it's only beneficial to the city, to our local workforce, and to our tax payers and our coffers here at the city, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, Mr. Fusay and Mr. Gaffey, you want to rejoin us? We'll continue on with ordinance, the second reading of ordinance 2024-05. Ms. Hamilton, if you'll please read that.
Ordinance number 2024-05, an ordinance amending Chapter 162, Management Benefits of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Worcester, Ohio, and allowing for immediate enactment.
Ms. Knappich, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I have discussed this matter with the city law director. We had originally looked at putting a part-time person, and did put a part-time person as the deputy law director, and that worked out well. However, that person is no longer available. So what we really want to look at is putting on a full-time assistant law director or deputy law director. And there are a couple, I think there are pros to this. And one is when you are offering a full-time position as opposed to a part-time position, you get many more applicants. And hopefully we can get some applicants who are looking to make careers in municipal law. Things have gotten much more complicated over the years. There are many more legal issues to deal with, both internally and externally with the city. And it is a considerable cost savings if we can have a deputy law director to whom we are paying a salary, as opposed to outside counsel who we are paying hourly. I can guarantee you, as being one of those outside counsel kind of people, you're going to save money with an in-house person. No doubt about it. And it seems to me to make sense that we would hire someone, or look to hire someone full-time, as opposed to sending things out to law firms to do the work that we can do probably more efficiently and definitely less expensively than we could by sending work out to outside counsel. Was there anything else, Mr. Scavelli?
No, I believe you covered everything very well, Ms. Knappich. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've been doing, though, if anyone on council has any questions for us.
Do we see, what would you envision this role doing for you at that point?
So currently, Mr. Gibbons, who unfortunately is leaving us, works for us for most of the time 4 days a week. So the only difference here is that this individual, if full-time, would be one more day a week. So basically, they'd be doing the same role he's doing. Now, we have increased our workload since Mr. Gibbons has been here. We could still get by with a part-time person. The biggest issue for us is really just recruitment at this point in the market currently. So That's really our biggest issue, but we have increased our workload since the time that he's been here. So they'd be doing the exact same job he is. Basically, what that job is assisting with the law department workflow. And then most of the prosecution that we've taken over from the prosecutor's office, which is a small amount. But Kevin, Mr. Gibbons, has been handling that for us almost exclusively. So that's what we'd be looking at.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Scully, if I recall correctly, I think the part-time salary was in the $70,000 range for
It is.
Mr. Gibbons. Are we looking to increase that when we go to the full-time, and what kind of a range do we think we're going to be able to offer to attract people?
That hasn't been set yet, but the range is going to be somewhere, depending on experience, somewhere between, I believe, could be as low as 80,000 up to possibly 115, somewhere around there, depending on experience and what they bring to the position, but that has not been set yet. It'll depend on who comes and who the candidates are.
Well, that might have something to do with how many candidates you get, though, depending on what you're able to offer.
Well, that is true.
So, yeah, I support it. I think you've been doing a great job since you've been here,
Thank
and
you.
we appreciate all the work. I had to support this. I just, hope that we can do what we need to do to get you the help you need.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Scavelli?
Yes.
So you mentioned in your explanation that Mr. Givens has been taking some cases off of the workload for the prosecutor's office. Are there more cases that could be taken over by a full-time deputy law director, or are we taking over everything that we possibly could at this point?
We're not looking to take anything right now. As I explain, a lot of times when we do the prosecutor contract, I still think that's the most affordable way to handle our criminal prosecution. So right now, we're not looking at taking on any more. What we have taken so far is property maintenance cases, and recently something the prosecutor's office has always done was property destruction orders. So that's when the case is over and the evidence is still in our evidence locker. A court has to tell us what we can do with it. Traditionally, they've done that. It just wasn't happening at a very fast pace. And so because of that, we did take that over. We've taken that over. We started taking it over as just cases that were never charged. And since then, that's moved to every case that the police department handles. So that is an increased workload. But at this point, we're not looking at taking on anything else from them.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on council with any comments? All right. Well, Ms. Knappich, where would you like to take this?
Well, I think I would like to move this to suspend the rules and move it to third and final reading.
All right, motion to suspend the rules by Ms. Knappich. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Huzay. Ms. Hamilton, please call the roll on the vote.
Malta.
Yes.
Gaffey.
Yes.
Knappich.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Huzay.
Yes.
Abernathy.
Yes.
Warden.
Yes.
All right. The rules have been suspended. Ms. Knappich, what would you,
Yes, I'd like to move to adopt, please.
motion to adopt, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Myers. Ms. Hamilton, please call the roll.
Malta.
Yes.
Gaffey.
Yes.
Knappich.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Huzay.
Yes.
Abernathy.
Yes.
Warden.
Yes.
All right. Ordinance 2024-05 is adopted. Guess you can go try to find yourself a assistant law director there, Mr. Scavelli.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanders.
All right. Well, that's our unfinished business. We'll move on to new business, which at this point, Resolution 2024-20. But before we can turn this over to Mr. Huzay, we'll have Ms. Hamilton please read it for us.
Resolution number 2024-20, a resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to purchase a VAC-all jet and vacuum Freightliner truck.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Huzay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this is a resolution to authorize the Director of Administration to purchase a used VAC-all jet and vacuum Freightliner truck. This is something that we use for our stormwater maintenance repairs. Mr. Denning explained to me today that this is something we use to kind of clear blockages we may have in those lines, and this would serve as a primary use for his crew, but this would be a backup for also the one that we use at the utility division. You can see the approximate cost here at $220,000. Mr. Denning did say earlier today that he searched far and wide for a new piece of equipment, but those exceed $500,000, so he thought he'd save us a little bit of scratch by going used instead of new. Any other further questions or anything else? I'd yield to Mr. Montgomery since Mr. Denning's absent today.
Is there any questions?
I have a quick question. I noticed that what we're doing is we are purchasing a 2018 Jet Vacuum Freightliner truck with 147 hours, which will be replacing a very old 1999 International with 1,900 hours. I just want to say that I give Mr. Denning a lot of credit for finding such a great deal with the number of hours. There are very few hours on this truck. And apparently he found it from another community. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. A much larger community than us. They have 3 of these, and they just simply replace them every 5 years. So we actually sent a couple guys up, our maintenance guys up, to look at this one. And it said it's in great shape. The gentleman from this other community said it really doesn't need to be replaced, but, you know, they had it in their budget, so he's gonna go ahead and replace it. Anyway, this would be the last of their 3 they would replace, but, so, you know, he's happened to find it, he happened to get in first. There's 2 other entities currently waiting to buy this, so if we don't buy it, they'll sell it right away to somebody else.
Well, kudos to Mr. Denning for finding this great find. Next time I go to look for a car, I'm going to take him with me.
Okay, there's no other questions. Mr. Huzay, what would you like to do with this?
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Huzay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Knappich. Ms. Hamilton, please call the roll to motion to adopt.
Gaffey.
Yes.
Knappich.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Huzay.
Yes.
Abernathy.
Yes.
Warden.
Yes.
Malta.
Yes.
All right, with that, motion's approved. We'll move on to miscellaneous. Normally, we would have comments from council, but in light of the fact that we will have comments from council after we get a comprehensive plan presentation from OHM and the planning department from the city. So with that,
Just me. I can give a quick introduction to, most of you have met Aaron, you've been part of some of you have been part of the steering committee, you've been to public meetings. Aaron Dominies from OHM, they're the ones that we brought in 10 years ago when we started from scratch and did a completely new comprehensive plan. We did then engage with them again 10 years later to do our update to our 10-year plan. So his firm comes with a lot of background, a lot of knowledge of our city, and he's going to give you just a summary of the plan that has already been adopted by our planning commission. So it doesn't require official adoption by city council, or city council be involved, is when we have issues that come out of this plan, say zoning issues, ordinance changes or anything like that. Obviously, that's when it's going to come back to city council then to review and approve those. So, Aaron?
Thanks, Joel. Joel said I had an hour and a half to do this. So.
Good luck.
25 minutes. 25 minutes. Yeah, my name's Aaron Diamond. I'm a partner and principal at OHM. Been working with you guys for over 10 years now. Downtown streetscape, downtown Center Green, Christmas Run Park, signage, plans. So you guys have been one of my favorite communities to work with, really because you do good planning and then you get it done, right? So I don't do this to the quintessential plan on the shelf. It doesn't make me happy. So when we get to work together and implement it, that's a great partnership. And we've enjoyed working with you all over the last decade or so. We're an architecture, engineering, planning firm in Columbus, not too far from here, and we have staff in Akron and Cleveland, which have been engaged a little bit here on this project as well. So today, I'm going to give you an overview of the project. I will talk about what we learned I gave the mayor an honorary city planning badge before I started because he covered a lot of good topics, especially in the housing front. And so I think he made a good point there. So I'm not going to repeat a lot of that information, maybe a little bit in a different way. And then I'll talk a lot about the community engagement piece. And then most of my time I'll spend just kind of going through the framework of the plan. I also want to point out we have a couple of steering committee members here. Barb, you were with us, Craig and Jen, right? Because we're all part of baking this cake with us. So thank you for that and being part of the journey. So quickly, in terms of what this document is, I think most of you are familiar with this. I know we have some new council members with us today as well. This is really your blueprint. I mean, how do you build a shed, a house, a car? You have to have a set of blueprints. This is your blueprint for the city. It's really set to be a guide over the next 10 years. I know that says 10 to 15. In today's world, nobody's crystal ball is working after 10 years. All right, everything's changing so fast. So it's really about 10 years is the lifespan. That's how long we had the last one before it was updated. It's intended to be citywide, long-ranging. It's important that it's general in nature. It's not overly prescriptive. So that's important to point out here. We really focus a lot on physical development, physical design, and this can also serve as a policy document for the community. So the Planning Commission has two kind of pinnacles by which they make decisions, the zoning code and the comprehensive plan. Those two things need to go together, and that's what they rely on to make good informed decisions as it relates to growth and development. So it's really an important document from them from a policy standpoint. I always like to say it's not your zoning ordinance, so when you see the colored map, usually the community goes to where they live and they see the color and they think everything's changing, but it's not your zoning ordinance, it's not your zoning map, it's not your subdivision regulation, it's not your capital improvement plan, but I think very important to note is that this should inform your capital improvement planning yearly. And I know Joel's done a great job of that together with the staff of leaning on this. As you're putting your budgets together, thinking about where are you trying to go, what's in here, and what do you want to budget for. And that's really important because you want your investments to start stacking up to create a difference, right? The communities that don't have a plan, aren't doing good planning, are just, plugging holes. That doesn't create change. And so this document really helps with that. So we led this effort, but I don't think we created the deliverable, right? I like to think that we're kind of that wagon master going down the trail, and we're keeping everybody going. But really, we led a process, and the committee that was put together did a lot of the lifting with us, helping set the goals and the direction. We would take all that information, package it up, give it back to the committee, get their feedback. But I didn't want to come here and create this plan for Worcester from Columbus or Worthington. It was really up to the committee to put this together, and through this process, we worked iteratively over 5 phases. The first one was getting going. The second one was getting informed technically. So I'll talk a little bit about that technical information. The phase 3 was really getting intuitively informed from the aspirations and the values of the community, pulling it all together in phase 4 to craft that framework, and then phase 5 kind of buttoning it up and getting ready for implementation. So that was the process we were on, and over about the last year, kind of putting this document together for you all. So real quick in terms of what we learned, right? There's 2 key inputs I just talked about, right? The technical piece, that was all the research we did, looking at demographics, land use trends, where can you develop and grow, those types of things. The other key input is the engagement piece. What does your community have to say? And the magic comes when we pull those 2 pieces together and start to craft those goal statements, update the land use plan, create some development concepts for different parts of the community that respond to both of those things. So there's a lot of information in the plan, and I'm not going to talk for an hour and a half about the technical findings, but that's all included in here. It's all outlined in all the presentations that we gave to the committee. There's just a couple I wanted to highlight, and Mayor, you stole my thunder and actually presented some of this. The first is where you're growing, right, and how you're growing. So those are the two key things that we always think about. How are you growing and where are you growing? So the how is at what pace. You guys have been on a pretty decent clip. And I work all across Ohio as a micropolitan community. You've had steady growth. You're continuing we're projecting that steady growth to continue. And then we looked at different growth scenarios in terms of how many people per year you may be adding. What does that look like in terms of land consumption and housing? And we landed kind of right in the middle of that moderate growth scenario where the committee was landing and leaning on So that's your kind of North Star where you think you're going. So we're looking at, planning for 120 people per year. I always ask, when do we run out of land, right? That's a really difficult question, because are you growing up? Are you growing out? What kind of housing are you developing? What kind of economic development projects are you facilitating? So we don't know that. But you are, you're not completely landlocked like a lot of communities, so that growth, most of which we can accommodate internally, and that's really what your community has told you, and I'll talk about that. On the housing front, the mayor talked a lot about housing, right? So roughly 11,000 households currently in the community, each made up of around 2 members in each household. I could talk to you about that trend, whether you're getting larger or smaller, kind of trending down in terms of that household structure. The mayor talked a lot about the housing topic, but didn't touch on this, and that's kind of that family structure, right? So family establishments representing roughly half, 54%. One or more persons living together create that family structure, that household. While non-family units are accounting to 45%. So I think a lot of communities I work with, and I don't think this was in a different scenario, where everybody thinks it's the family living together, you have schools and, families all over, white picket fences. That's really not the case, right? You're about half and half in terms of having a family household and non-family households. And additionally, 23% of those households have children, 76% are without children. And nationwide, that trend is continuing, right? More families without children, in my office, all the young talent, they're not having children. And I think the last person having a child in our office right now is 37. So they're waiting longer, or they're just not having children, mostly because that's just not the way they're doing things. And quite frankly, back to the median income, they realize they can't afford it in today's world. That changes your housing demand and what people are looking for. So you can go back and talk about things being built before 1970, 1973 and 1974, got that data point, whatever. In the early 70s, that was a different household structure. More families, were together. We built bigger houses to accommodate that, but we haven't built for this shift. And so if you looked at that trend that the mayor showed, and I'm glad he brought that in because I didn't have those slides, we haven't been building here to accommodate this shift. So that's important to note. This was another interesting statistic I brought in. Again, the mayor may not touch on this, it's a good one, but it relates back to housing again. So approximately 43% of adults in Worcester are married, while 57% have never been married or divorced or widowed. I bring that up because you guys probably know these people within your community, within your circles, who want to stay in your community, their lifestyles changed, something happened, but they want to stay in Worcester and they don't need the 3-4 bedroom house. I have friends from family like that in Worthington, and it's a big challenge in Worthington too. We need to build housing. If you don't have those options for people, they tend to look elsewhere. Now, you're a micropolitan, so it's harder just to get up and leave. You're leaving the community altogether. But it's important to note that this is a big part of your community and some folks that you should be planning for moving forward. So these data points were also brought up. These are some data points on housing, your median home value, compared to the county and the state. So you can see how you're stacking up there as compared to those two entities. Over occupied housing at about 55%, vacant housing relatively low, 6.9, and that median contract rent is at $622. There's some pushback on that from our committee, thinking that was much higher. That's the data point that I'm pulling from Esri, which is the data source that we use, as well as the U.S. Census. So those are some key cornerstones that were considered by the committee as they were putting this document together. And again, you saw this graph earlier that the mayor presented. This was the median year housing was built, right? So this is important because that older housing requires more upkeep and more investment, right? So if we're starting to think about building wealth, and you're sinking more wealth into maintaining those older homes, from heating, from maintenance, and if you can't do that, things start to fall apart, right? Things start to get run down and you can't upkeep the house. And a lot of times in some of these older units, you also have renters. And they're not making that investment like an owner-occupied unit. So those older housing units were something we thought quite a bit about in putting this together, because we want to make sure there's newer housing options, not only to meet lifestyle needs and changes, right? Things like size of closets, bathroom configurations, first floor masters, things like that, that we didn't have those in consideration back then. But we also want to meet the affordability component of it, smaller, more nimble, but also with the updated amenities. On the technical side, and I credit staff for working with us together on this. This is actually one of their maps. The question is, where do we grow, right? Where are the opportunities for growth? So this map shows different areas around the community, both within the city limits and with your facility planning area. That was what we looked at in terms of our study area, was what can you accommodate from within your facility planning area. And you can see that the color scheme over there is the number of acres. So we really were kind of focusing on those larger clusters where you could get significant growth or development, right? So the 10-acre parcel is great, but a lot of developers aren't going to take on a project of that scale because they can't get the return. They're looking bigger. And if you think about your housing deficit, we were looking bigger too, because we want to make a bigger impact with some of the opportunities to grow new housing and economic development opportunities in your community. So we started to look at this pattern. This will come up later as I talk about the focus areas we looked at. But we really want to look at these areas in terms of where can we grow? Where does it make sense in terms of the amount of available land and the scale of it that can accommodate that development in the future. So really looking on that northern edge and also kind of in that southern quadrant there, that southwest quadrant. So that was a very brief overview of the technical analysis, but I wanted to hone in on the housing piece and then the where piece, because that's going to come up later when I talk about the land use map as well as the focus areas, okay? On the community engagement side, so a lot was done here, right? So this is a big anchor component of what we rely on when we're making informed decisions to put this together. So did the community survey. Last time we did a statistically valid survey, we didn't do that this time. We just did a community survey. I can tell you, having done both the non-statistically valid survey and the statistically valid survey, once you hit a survey response like this, this number of responses, the delta between those is very small. So I feel pretty confident that while it's not statistically valid, it would be close to maybe what we would get if we did that. So we had 1,800 responses with the survey. We did a number of stakeholder meetings with different groups, business groups, real estate, healthcare, education, arts, and housing groups. So these are the special groups that we wanted to talk to outside of a public meeting, right? We would make sure their voices weren't lost within those meeting structures. So that was 6 sessions with roughly 60 attendees. So for me, I find that to be one of the most valuable components of the process with the community engagement. Get a lot of good insight from these different groups within your community. And then we did 3 public open houses. So we did 2 sessions kind of midway through, one at the community center, senior center, one at Spoon, and then the last one we did actually here in Chambers, had about 100 people attend those different events. So that was a summary of the community engagement process. We want to bore you with the details. This is actually the QR code to get you to the survey results if you want to look at them online, and they're also published in the presentations that we gave earlier. So the 1,800 responses, 27 questions, open for over 6 weeks. I always ask the question, are we on the right track or wrong track? This is pretty good because you usually get a third, right? The rules of thirds. So about 20% feel like you're going the wrong direction. That's okay, because a third of the people are always going to feel you're going the wrong direction, generally. But about 60% feel like you're heading the right direction, and about 22% said they didn't know. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is extremely low and 5 is extremely high, how would you rate the quality of life as a Worcester resident? So you can see here, folks, but 48% are at a 4, 16% at 5, 28% at 3. So generally, people feel like their quality of life is tracking good, and we want to maintain that and continue to support that. And one of the other key questions I wanted to highlight for you was, in your opinion, what was the most significant challenge facing Worcester? Poverty and homelessness was number 1 by the 1,800 folks that responded, followed by housing options and opportunities. So the housing, not only did we hear that from the public, I talked about those focus groups we did. When we talked to the business community, that was their number one thing that they wanted to talk about, workforce housing, to get people here, get work closer to work, reducing travel times, being closer, building community, building investment in not only the business, but the people here and the community overall. So that, we heard that in two different venues. And attracting and retaining workforce, again, goes back to housing, good jobs, that type of thing. And then just in terms of, how long have you lived here? Most of folks have lived here for over 30 years. You guys have a lot of lifers. I think that speaks to the quality of this community. By the way, the last time we did the plan, one of my staffers was like, hey, I want to move to Worcester. Ended up moving to Granville. Not exactly Worcester, but, and this time around, same thing. Some of the younger staff said that, hey, I think I could see myself living here. So you can see the breakdown of how long folks have lived here. That's who took the survey. And then in terms of their age, mostly 35 to 44, that's good. I only say that because usually we see the highest quadrant, that 55 to 64 or even older taking surveys. So you can get a lot of folks here engaged kind of middle of life here. These are the stakeholder focus group sessions. This is what we heard from them. They were really interested in balanced growth, keeping workforce and families in Worcester, attainable housing, mental health came up, continuing the revitalization of downtown, a pedestrian-friendly community, so connectivity was very important, not just vehicular, but able to walk and bike around. More green spaces, they really value green space here and reinvesting in the ones you have, so that was something that came up as well. So that's a snapshot of some of the things that we were learning with the committee that helped us start to craft the framework of the plan. On the open house side, just some eyewash. These are some of the activities we were doing. We started to ask a lot of the same questions related to housing. What do you think the issues are? What do you think the opportunities are in the community? And these were some of the key findings from those public events. So diverse housing for all came out again. We talked about the mayor talked about your agricultural identity. That was coming through again. That came through 10 years ago as well. So one of the interesting things, having done this now twice with you all, I don't think what your community is saying in terms of how they want to grow has changed. It's careful growth, looking mostly inward while cautiously looking outward. I mean, that's how I would phrase this up in a nutshell. So, right there you see smart growth on that third bullet. Like to see development of more inner city transit options. So transit was coming up, again, connectivity. That was something we heard a lot about. We know that's evolving here real time as well. Additional shopping and entertainment options. I don't know if I've ever done a comprehensive plan where entertainment and adequate parking didn't come up. So congratulations, you checked those boxes like everybody else does. And then working in partnerships. So that came up, but that was kind of unique to you guys. Community telling you to continue to work with the county, continue to work with the schools, that they think that's important. So that was unique to you. Just a couple other things here. Again, coming from those public open houses that you can scan through there. You see the walkability coming up. You see workforce coming back up again. You see parks and recreation coming up back again, gathering spaces. So you can see from these slides, these themes that start to build, right? And so that's what we did with our committee. We combed through hundreds of ideas. We started to theme them by topic. And then from those themes, like connectivity and walkability, start to come goals and actions. So real time, you're seeing, I see that being repeated. So did we. And that's how we started to create the plan framework, right? So key takeaways from the technical analysis, started to lean on key takeaways from the public engagement, and we start to put those two things together. And that starts to form the basis of this framework of the plan. So, just so happens I have a fun slide that really articulates that visually for you all. Technically, intuitively informed. So your plan by the numbers, as it started to come together, we have 6 sections. There's 10 goal statements, 17 objectives, and 100 actions. That may seem like a lot. But if you do 10 of those a year over 10 years, you can accomplish this plan. It's actually pretty lean for a comprehensive plan, which can have 250 actions. We like to, less is more. That's our approach to documents like this. If you do 5 to 10 things every year and you do them well, and then you finish in 10 years, you rinse and repeat. And that's, what you did from the last plan. Joel, I left out the slides of everything you did and accomplished last time. It wasn't insignificant of what you accomplished from the last plan. It had to be half or more. So the plan structure starts to look something like this. I know you all woke up Sunday morning and combed through this with your coffee. The first chapter is just setting the table. That's your plan overview. It talks about the process. It talks about the plan elements, how this came together, who's guiding the effort. The second chapter is those existing conditions. So some of the graphs I showed you, it's all contained in there. And the key takeaways from that data is articulated in there. Chapter 3, that's your community engagement section, summarizing all of that data. People can scan the QR code in the plan and go back and look at all the results from those questions from the community survey. That's all in there. And then chapter 4 is the plan framework, right? So this is the cornerstone of the plan. This is your future land use map, which I'll talk about here in a little bit more detail in a second. This is the page that your planning commission is probably going to spend the most time on and wear out. And then following that section, we have chapter 5, which are focus areas. I'll spend a fair amount of time going through these today. By that I mean like 10 to 15 minutes. And then implementation, which is essentially a matrix that has every goal, all the actions. There's a time frame in there, that short, medium, long-term action. And then who generally should be that responsible party. So for your staff, your administration, Jonathan, Vince, this is what they should be looking at with you guys every year to making sure we get these things done. So the future land use map looks something like this. Not too dissimilar to last time. The nuances really came in the focus areas. So what this map is essentially if and when you see a change on land use, right? Specifically a zoning change. The goal is to have it in alignment to this plan or this map. So this should inform that zoning change. It should be one of the bases for making that decision for planning commission. And each one of those colors represents a land use typology, which is articulated here. So you have your conservation rural district, you have your innovation district. So the description of that district, general uses, and then some imagery that starts to articulate the vision for that district. Again, if somebody wants to change that zoning, it's from A to B, this is one place your planning commission should go to make that informed decision as things change in the future. So that's an important note. Now, I said there's some nuances in this map from the last one, right? So we're not fundamentally changing residential neighborhoods. Those aren't changing. Your downtown's not changing significantly. These focus areas, because of how you're built out within your community, were really the place that we spent most of the time. This is where we went from 80,000 feet of this map, right, and this type of larger paintbrush. My Worcester brush folks always talk to the paintbrush. Painting. That was too easy. To a finer brush, right? So we're getting down and we're working at a more detailed level because we think it's really important to guide the vision for these particular areas. Why? One, they can be a catalyst for change in your community. There's an opportunity to revitalize them, and there's opportunity for growth within them, and we want to guide that carefully. So these were some of the areas we looked at. So if you recall that north end, so there's two big areas, focus areas on that north end. That's from that map I showed you where you can develop, have significant growth. Those kind of line up with that. We also have the Arts District, which we talked about earlier, East Liberty, the Hospital District. East Liberty and the Hospital District were in your 2010 plan, by the way. And then Smithville, Western, and Gyers Chapel are newer focus areas, as well as the Arts District. So this was a fun district to look at as a planner because it starts to bring together your downtown, arts, culture, housing, creativity, all those things that we think make great places, right? So it's not like we're planning out in a greenfield. This was a district that has a lot of things going for it, right? So you have the Center for the Arts, you have some new private investment happening, you have the connectivity to downtown, And so the vision here looks something like this. So we have institutional uses, which is that teal color, which already exist. We're looking at art, parks, and green space. How do we incorporate that into the area? Some of that's already being planned and talked about. And then a large part of the district, we're really focused on mixed use and housing. This is one of those places where we think we can get scale contextually that matches within the neighborhood, that fits within the neighborhood. It's within walking distance to jobs, it's within walking distance to entertainment. So when you think about creating different housing options, these are important amenities that you want to have. We don't want to stick, mixed use, higher density housing out on the edges. That's not connected. Can't walk to park, can't walk to schools, can't walk to downtown, services, that type of thing. So in this particular area, what we're looking at was medium density residential housing, 1 to 2 story commercial along Market, and then 3 to 4 story mixed use a little bit closer to downtown. We articulated how that can happen, because that was one of the questions. How do you do that? So we had a sample block on the left, and we're just showing different ways that can come together. So one is through incremental infill. So a developer, he or she is able to acquire a building or collection of buildings, and they can start to do some scalable infill development. So you see that in the middle. And then something might be more intense infill. Maybe they can control the whole block and you start to get something larger in scale. So there's different ways that can happen, and those housing typologies articulated on the bottom kind of line up with what we're thinking can take shape within the district. Don't get hung up on the architecture. Those are just little axum diagrams to illustrate the different types of development that could take shape there. So you can see how those A's and B's and C's could line up as infill within that district. The other thing we looked at was, an arts district has to have creativity, it has to be whimsical, it has to have places for art and play and interaction of all those pieces. So looking at Wilmette, the existing condition, you have sidewalks there, you have street lighting, but, how do we take that to the next level? All right, so it's an arts district, and we can connect it to downtown. So visually, we can set that cue to people who come to Worcester, hey, there's something different happening down that way. So we've worked with you on a number of streetscapes here. This isn't intended to be the Cadillac of streetscapes. This is intended to be a lighter touch. Obviously, we're changing out lighting, right? So can we change lighting to a more pedestrian scale? Can we look at the utilities there? Can we create opportunities for art along the way, from seating to art installations, murals, outdoor dining entertainment? Some of that's already taking shape in real time. And just cleaning things up, painted crosswalks, that type of thing, just changing up the character of the district. And embracing your art community to do that with you as part of that. So that's an example of how that can happen. That's not how it is going to happen. The design of the streetscape, that's a whole other process. This is giving you direction to go do this, though, as part of the vision. Start to think about that streetscape. So that's an overview of the Arts District. We also looked at East Liberty. We've looked at this district a couple of times. The last time we looked at it actually kind of set the table for some of the things you're already seeing here that have taken shape. We just evolved it a little bit further and started to think, this is much more surgical now, about how do we want to integrate parking. And this is real time in response to what's taking shape out there. So we started to build this out of how do we want to facilitate the growth and development in this area. So one of the things obviously in this area is parking. How do we integrate that, take it off of Liberty Street, but also serve all the development within this place? The other thing, just like the Arts District, that we believe is important here is housing, for all the same reasons of the Art District, right? Close to dining, close to amenities, could be close to your existing community center, things like that, right? So we have mixed use, we have flats, we have townhomes we're showing. Not going to happen exactly like this, but this should be your guide to start to try to facilitate development in this way. But there's 2 other key components here I think are important to point out that should absolutely be considered as this place evolves. Number 1 is a public space, signature public space. So when we worked with you all last time and we built Center Green, that was one gesture. That wasn't to fill an entire void of creating gathering places downtown and social gathering places. And this one's of a larger scale. So, surrounding all that with development, but also creating this great lawn where you can do special events, that type of thing. We also looked at kind of the alignment of Bell down to south. And that little section there being something special. I don't know if you can see it, but right at Liberty and Bell, kind of on the southern edge, there's an arch that kind of goes over there. And changing the feature of that streetscape to make that also a place where you can host special events. The vision would be you shut that down, you got the great lawn out there, you're doing food trucks, your bands, blah, 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 people are hanging out. You already got restaurants, you probably get more restaurants, entertainment there. This becomes a secondary district to downtown. You have downtown proper, you have the Arts District, and now you have the East Liberty District. But they all work in concert to make the engine go within the downtown area. So this is kind of the vision for how we believe this area could take shape. Again, the buildings aren't going to be shaped like that. They're not going to look exactly like that. But I think this is a pretty good guide to get you going. So just some different views. This is looking up Bell. See the green space there towards Liberty. And that streetscape, the arch is articulated there. Could be an idea what that could look like. Alley improvements, you can see Mariola there, kind of all putting these pieces together. Built the model, that's how everything's laid out today. The hospital district, let's call it Hospital District 2.0. We took this a little bit further. This was in the last plan. Hospital district was a focus area of the 2010 plan. I don't think we got to where we wanted to go here in this district over the last 10 years. So kind of re-engage, refocus. Hospital was on the journey with us, informing us of what their plans were. We have a potential expansion of the hospital on there, of potentially where they want to grow. But this is another place to add housing. This was important to them. I can't speak exactly for them, but if they can get the nurses, the first responders, everybody closer to work, that's a benefit for them. It's a benefit for the patients at the hospital. So this is like real workforce housing within a district, if we can create this. It also imagines the kind of the redevelopment of some of the older commercial areas you have up here. So looking along the frontage there, you have some larger mixed-use buildings, 2 to 3 story mixed use, some medical office mixed use in front of that potential expansion. And as you move further south along Bell there, where you see MOB, that's medical office buildings to complement the hospital. So some significant scale here. Don't ask me how many units, because we didn't calculate how many units, but it's significant. I mean, you'd be talking hundreds of units here that you can accommodate. So when we talked about attainable housing, that doesn't have to be owner occupied, right? In fact, most of the folks that work with me, and these folks are making good salaries as architects, engineers, urban designers. Obviously, Columbus is a different market. That's not their dream, and quite frankly, they can't afford it. They'd like to buy a house, but that's not where they're at. So this is a really good option for some of the younger generations, young professionals who don't want to own something, want to be in the community, as well as folks stepping down in the community, stepping out of their owner-occupied unit, and folks that are trying to work, are going to work for the hospital. So this is almost a little self-contained district. That can be something special within the community. So just a different look there. You see the medical office block on the left, moving up to the mixed use. You have townhomes as well as multifamily at the top end. The other key improvement we talked about here was improving the intersection. So you can call it a peanut, you can call it a belongabout, but it's a key feature, and we also believe it's going to help move traffic more seamlessly within the area. A belongabout, or a peanut. I like a belongabout. It's more fun to say. So let's take a look at the Smithville Western District. So this kind of butts up to your commercial area that you have on the north on Burbank there. And so part of what we're looking at is kind of extending that district to the east, also starting to integrate and accommodate more residential up against that commercial district. The whimsical diagram where you see kind of what looks like an old arcade game there happening is essentially giving kind of direction, or it's a gesture to how do we create these green nodes and connectivity within this space. So talking with Vince, we were talking earlier about, hey, we have developers, we have a 30% requirement for open space, they may want to do less, and I was just kind of spitballing with them. I said, hey, if it's 30%, 20%, 15, I don't care. I just want it to be intentional, and it should all connect to create a network versus that 30% is your leftover stormwater basin, right? I'm not saying that Vince would do that, because I know he's a good planner, he would do that. But what we're trying to show here is trying to create more of a web and interaction of these different areas through integrated and connected green spaces, allowing people to have those amenities who may live up here and live next to the Burbank Road commercial corridor. Just another place where we think we can start to chip away at those 2,000 units within the community that are needed desperately. So the yellow is that suburban development. You guys know what that is. Single-family detached, 10,000 square foot lots. And then you kind of step back towards the commercial district to something a little bit more dense. And these are the housing typologies that we talked about and envisioned for that district. Apartments, cluster homes, live, work, duplex, single-family, townhomes, the whole gamut, the whole mix. The nice thing about this is that you also get a full spectrum of ages you can accommodate and kind of have intergenerational living, which is great, right? Then you have real community being built. I think this is the last one, actually, working towards the end of the presentation here, we looked at Guyers Chapel. This is an area that, is unlike Smithville Western, in that it's much more traditional in the suburban residential pattern. But again, we really want to make sure that as we plan the open spaces and the green spaces here, we're connecting them. So when you see suburban cluster development, what that means is we're trying to set aside larger areas for preservation and open space, up 20, 30, 40, 50% of the whole development as protected open spaces. Doesn't mean you have any less density. It means we're just clustering those areas down and having larger open spaces that we're then connecting with trails and pathways, building amenities within this area. So if and when this area develops, this will be the area where we imagine more of that traditional suburban development, and as you move further north and start to transition out, more of that clustered conservation development style. At the bottom, you can see kind of that transition into the innovation district, all connected with greenways and potential green space nodes. That's a little bit different than the pattern you guys have had in the past. And that's why we wanted to focus a little bit more on that today. So we're not just building pods of subdivisions that you have to go out to a major arterial or collector street to connect over. That everything starts to get more connected, walkways, trails, green spaces. The poster child of that, in my opinion, in Ohio is Dublin. If you've ever been to Dublin, you can get everywhere you need on a 10-foot wide path. Everything's connected. It's pretty dang nice. And they've even branded it. It's greener in Dublin. So, that starts to be the style we're talking about here. That's at no cost to you guys. That's just doing better planning and making sure we get developers and investors to do good planning with us. So that's the vision for that particular focus area. So when I talk about clustering, again, I'm almost done here, but the top left corner, that is a traditional suburban development. That's the 2-5 acre, let's call it what it is, it's sprawl. We talk about rural cluster development. You see that on the top right. By the way, these are all the same density, right? It's the same number of people, the same number of units in every single one of those drawings. And one of my favorites is the bottom right, which is that suburban cluster, because you get a little bit of everything in there, and you get all incomes, you get all ages, all kind of living together. You can have step up, you can step down into different products. The most important thing for the diagram, and I already explained this, is what you've created there, unlike the top left, is value. Because you've created amenities for the community, you've created amenities for the people living there, you've protected open space, and there's been numerous studies that when you do this, the values are much higher than if you just did the sprawl over time, because you've created those amenities and the quality of life that people want to live next to. That's about building that community value there. That's it for me. I don't think those last two slides should have been in there for you all today. So what I covered was, number one, what is this plan? Why do we do it? What is it? What is it not? What was the process we went through? What did we technically, did we learn some of the snapshots? What did your public tell us? How it came together, your land use map, and then most importantly, those focus areas which really come through. I think as important components of the plan. So that's about a year's worth of work in less than 30 minutes. So I'll take questions. If you have any questions for me, I think an important step for you all to think about next is mobilizing this. So specifically for some of those focus areas, it's going to take some work, some code massaging to make that stuff go. But what you want to do is do that step so that you're development ready. You don't want the investor developer to have to come in and work with the law director and planning commission to try to get variance after variance after variance. They're not going to want to do it. They want certainty moving forward. So that's an important step for you all to think about. So any questions for me?
I got a question. Looks like a lot of, and obviously we got a 30-something minute presentation over a year's worth of work. Lots of projections of put building here and put housing there. And I'm paying attention to the map, like there's stuff existing there. So there's people who own that property.
Sure.
I just feel a little gross saying, well, we're just going to sweep you aside and we're going to put this vision into place. I'm curious to what we're kind of,
For years, they're gonna blow up the businesses and take them down to South Street for some reason. They've been saying that for years.
so I'm curious. I'm just curious, because in reality, a lot of this is good. It addresses a problem that Mayor Reynolds had brought up, which is housing. I'm just curious. It all looks nice and fancy and looks neat. How do we do it? That's the big question.
Hand in glove,
Yeah.
right? So the private sector wants an expectation for where you're trying to go. And essentially what this is it's that poster say, hey, this is where we're trying to go, this is what we're willing to accept, this is what we want to do. So, they're 85% of the implementation of this thing. And we've already seen that, right? So Matt Long has done a couple projects here. We saw the townhomes go up. We saw the new restaurant happening on East Liberty. So some of that's happening real time as we speak. The other, I'd say the 15% is you guys. What packages are you willing to put together? How does that line up to this? Nobody's talking about, washing out businesses and pushing them away. But if and when things transition, the expectation is that it's trying to transition this direction. So what you're saying, let's pick on East Liberty for a second. Somebody goes and acquires a bunch of property and they want to come do a development, and their vision is for storage. It's zoned for that, I can do that, or whatever. I shouldn't say it's zoned for that. But let's say they have a use that doesn't line up with this vision, then that'd be expectation not to give incentives, create a zoning change, or do anything that doesn't line up with this direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I guess the other little thing that it informed that you guys were all involved in is knowing that there's a potential that East Liberty could look different. We look for things like when houses, or deteriorating housing becomes available. And we know if there's even half of the development that we think could happen there, we're gonna need more parking down there to facilitate that. That's when we look at it and say, hey, here's 2 houses, maybe we should buy these so that we can put parking in, do a little proactive. So we did that, brought that to the council, and said, yeah, that's a good idea. So we bought 2 of those houses that are being demolished, and we're adding parking. So we'll be ready ahead before the next, mixed-use Italian restaurant and housing might come down there. And we know there's developers looking in that area. TCI is the other one, Worcester Grove, looked ahead and said, well, nobody's buying this piece of property. It's sitting there wasting away with plywood, on the windows, and a constant call to our police for vagrancy and those kinds of things. So we said, maybe that's an opportunity for us to do something and get ahead of this. And we have access as a city and as a CIC to grant money that isn't available to the developer. So we were able to acquire that. We're most of the way through, but getting ready to hopefully remediate that and offer it to the developer. They'll look at this plan and say, okay, these are the kind of things I know that are needed. There's some things that we know our community wants. They want housing, they want apartments downtown. And here's a way to do it in a dense way. So that's what that is. It's not saying this is what it will be, but it's a vision of looking forward as to what it could be and what might address some of the issues that our community are telling us that we're doing.
The communities that are winning right now, I say that word loosely, are those that are active in facilitating development. The communities that are sitting back and be like, well, whenever you guys are ready and we'll see what you bring to us, those communities are getting left behind. And I've worked with done this for 25 years, dozens of communities around Ohio. The communities that are being proactive, facilitating that, are the ones that are seeing the biggest increase in economic growth moving forward. And that's really, I think that's the new normal. I think for the development community is that cities are doing that work with them versus regulating them. That's a big shift that I think we've seen in the last 15 years. Regulating them versus facilitating with them. And we've done this for decades, have future land use maps, comprehensive plans that show a use for private property. That doesn't mean anybody has to do anything they don't want to do, sell their property, so. That was a good question, I appreciate it. Any other questions for me?
Thank you. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Nice job, thank you.
You guys got to do the hard work.
All right. With that, we'll move on to the second half of miscellaneous, which we'll start with Mr. Huzay. Do you have any comments, questions related to anything this evening?
Nope, nothing tonight, Mr. President, thank you.
All right, Mr. Abernathy.
Nothing to add, Mr. President.
Ms. Knappich.
I have nothing, thank you.
All right, Mr. Gaffey.
I guess I just want to say I appreciate the conversation tonight surrounding housing. I think it's definitely important, something that I think is very important to me and to my ward, especially since we're in a lot of that red zone that was on the map there. So I look forward to having some more discussion with the administration about that. So, thank you.
Ms. Warden.
Thank you to all the folks at OHM. I've, as you said, been a part of this process with the steering committee, and it's been very eye-opening, and it's been exciting to kind of envision what some of the potential development could be here in our community, so thank you. And Mr. Mayor, you touched on this very briefly in your comments earlier. I just wanted to thank the first responders who helped out with the Farmer Boy fire. I know several of us know Mr. Bostanzik is the manager there, and just thinking about all the employees there, and I know there's a lot of community support, whether it's from other area businesses or just people reaching out and there's a GoFundMe page to help with some of the employee expenses. So I know that had to be really terrifying, not only for the first responders, but also for the folks who rely on that for their livelihood. So thank you all and hopefully we can see them rebuild, because that's a big loss. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Malta.
I would like to also thank OHM, great presentation, clarified a lot of things and gave us all a vision. That's all I have tonight.
All right, thank you. Mr. Myers.
Nothing further this evening, thank you.
All right, just want to remind everyone, specifically on council, that on March 4th, we will have that Worcester Growth presentation at 6:45. I know the administration had already had mentioned it, but just want to make sure we get it on our calendars, because it should be for pretty much all the new people on council. It's going to be fairly interesting in terms of understanding what exactly Worcester Growth does. So with that, thank you all, and
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.